I'm going to show you how I made 3 tracks that got signed to Mango Alley. The first track is medium energy and it's great for warming up the dance floor. It sounds like this. Second track is more of a daytime vibe and a little bit higher energy, and it sounds like this. And the third one, oh boy, that one's a melter. I usually offer project files for these types of videos, but this time I'm doing something different. You can get some presets, samples, and a kick drum sample pack completely free by clicking the link in the description below. Subscribe to the channel if you're new, like the video if you learned something, and let's go ahead and get started. First track I'm going to go into is called Pacifist. The track is 122 beats per minute, and I believe it's in G minor. And starting off with the kick drum, it's 2 layers of kick. So we have the first layer, just the top, and the bottom. Some EQ and some compression, squaring out the lows and pushing up a little bit of the punchiness of the mids. Already moving on to the bass. Let's listen to what the bass and kick sound like together. So lots of movement and layers as I usually do. And on the group itself, I have some EQ just for some filtering with the automation. The multiband is compressing and then really compressing the highs because it's a very clicky bass. Just way too clicky with that. And then some mid and low compression as well, just to make it feel more full and more warm. Some sidechain compression on the whole group just so that it's kind of grooving down together. And then I have some EQ cutting out some of the mid frequencies up here for some of the mud. First layer of bass is a sub, but it's actually a sawtooth wave with the filter down so that it's mostly EQing out all the highs, and we're just getting those nice harmonics here. Some sidechain from the kick. And then track spacers for both the vowel bass and the other vowel bass. So this is 2 bass layers that I have, and both of these are playing sort of the same frequency as the bass. So I have these to cut the bass down a little bit when they're playing. So we have the vowel bass here and then the other vowel bass. And that way the bass isn't overlapping so much and causing phase problems in the mix. I'll show you the MIDI as well. I forgot to do that. So here's the MIDI. A little bit of velocity difference so that the bass is a tiny bit dynamic. And then I'll go into the vowel bass. So this one is actually a sample. So this is from this bass line that I found, but it's, oh yeah, so it's from a sample pack. And then I just adjusted it with some EQ, some compression. Then I cut it up so that it fits my track a little bit better. So I don't know if this is the exact original or if this is just the down pitched version. I made this track a long time ago, and then I put a different part of the bass line over here. The second one is actually pitched down a little bit lower, so it's like a different note. And it just adds a ton of warmth to that bass, and it creates that bass groove with the kick drum. On the channels themselves, I have some EQ, cutting out some of the lows, some multiband compression, and then some more track spacer as well, because a lot of these overlapping layers are going to be using track spacers so that the mix is a little bit cleaner, so things are ducking out of the way from each other. This is the MIDI for the high bass. So it's really just another way to add a bit of groove and grit to the bass line and make it more interesting and more catchy. And to make this, I used some EQ, cutting out a lot of the lows and maybe some of the higher gritty bits, some delay as well on there to give it a little bit of groove. Let's take a look at the preset itself. So it is a preset that I changed around a little bit. It's basically just a pluck. Mostly it's just cutting out the lows, which is giving us that nice crispy grit. So So the filter is cutting out a lot of the high end, and then it's just opening up when the filter or when the noise actually gets hit by using this envelope too. Pretty simple stuff, but very effective in creating more groove. And then finally, I have this hook block. This one's more low, more powerful. That's working alongside this bass as well, which is very tricky. You don't usually want to have two low subby elements like this. I had to work very carefully with this. So you have to be very careful with some side chaining and track spacer and stuff. But yeah, basically I just have the EQ cutting out some of the mud and some compression to make it fuller sounding, and then some delay. Pro Q. Adding a little bit of dynamic EQ so that the bass doesn't build up too much. And then the patch itself is another serum patch, and it's an FM pluck top. So I'm using FM. This is how it sounds without the FM. And then with the FM back on. And remember, you can download these presets for free in the link in the description below. One more time, listening to the kick and bass together. And in the track. Up next, we're going to focus on the drums. So I'll go through these pretty quickly. This is how the drums sound all together. Very full, very rhythmic, lots of layers, but I'm going to break it down so it's nice and simple to follow. First, I have the hi-hat, 2 layers. Fading out some of this so that it's not such a long hat. And one to give it a bit more power in the mids. And the MIDI itself has some groove on it. You can see that it's not totally lined up with the grid. And then some of these accent hats as well. Just giving it that extra swing and humanization. There is quite a bit of reverb on there to kind of give it a bit of a tail. And I'm using a return track for that, so I can turn that off. The reverb is a little bit long, but it's to kind of fill up the empty space because the hat itself is a little bit sharper. But typically I would have the reverb a little bit shorter than this, about 700, 600 milliseconds as opposed to the 900 it probably is. Yeah, 932. Next I have the clap, 2 layers here. A little bit more of like a snarey type sounding clap. Does that even make sense? And then I have some fading out as well, just because I find that the clap is, again, just too long, and I've also transposed it down. And shorten this one as well. I like to shorten my claps and snares and stuff to make them sound tighter and have more control over the actual body of the clap. Some saturation to bulk it up, not really much that you can hear. Just bringing out a little bit of the, almost like a compression, and then some EQ to shape it. Some reverb on it's for some automation purposes, so for buildups and stuff. And then this compressor, I don't think is even doing anything. Oh yeah, it's just cutting off the tops. Compressing it a little bit more. Up next, I have shakers. Very basic stuff, just shakers with a little accent here. Some swing on them. I probably took a hi-hat to make this. Yeah, I have 3 layers here. This one's not even on, so just 2 layers. Some sidechain from the kick, some vocoder. Some Haas effect to make it nice and wide. And some sidechain from the kick so that it's kind of grooving along with the kick drum. Makes it nice and groovy. Another shaker loop here. So this is one that I use to add a lot of swing. Love using drum loops like this with tons of movement. This ride, adding energy to the final drop. Sidechain compression. More percussion. So this is a little bit interesting. What I did with this one is I cut it up. So the original loop, I don't remember exactly how it sounds, but I cut it up so it's just accenting on the certain areas that I want. You can do this by changing this to beats and then preserving only like 16ths or 8ths or something. And then you can choose which ones of the transients you want to save. And then I did that here. And then I have this one with a ton of reverb, a ton of delay on it, and then cutting out a lot of the lows and highs. And that fills up the drum loop so much. So let's listen to all the individual drums with the kick drum. and the whole track. All right, let's move on to the synths next. Up first, I have what I call the WOMs, which are basically just sawtooths with a lot of attack and release. So if you look at the sound itself, it's just a sawtooth, a little bit of filtering with some automation so I can control opening and closing it during the buildups and and breakdowns and stuff. And then just a long attack, long release on the amplitude as well as the filter frequency. So it opens up really slowly. And as long as I'm holding it, it stays open. And when I release, it has that really long tail, especially with this long reverb at 6 seconds. And then a Camel Crusher is a free distortion plugin, which doesn't work on Mac, unfortunately, properly. But there is a distortion plugin there as well that's giving it that nice grit. Yeah, you can use Camel Crusher, you can use Decapitator, Heat Wave. There's tons of distortions. You just want a nice mechanical or like a nice really gritty distortion on that to make it really cut through. And then I have another sound here that's a bit lighter. This preset is called Boards of Zelina, and it's a really nice Pigments preset. And then with the MIDI here, you can take a listen. Playing a bunch of different notes off the grid, more of like a jam, just to add a lot of value to that breakdown. Combining it with the WOMs. Builds nice tension, works melodically off of both of them, so they're not playing the exact same notes, but more like a chord. One's playing one note, one's playing the other. Right before the breakdown into the build up into the drop. Super nice. Nice way to make that breakdown feel really, progressing through the track, because there's not really melodies in this track. It's more of a grooving track. So this was my way of adding a little bit of melody and a little bit of like experimentation into the breakdown. Up, I have these pads. Really simple, lush pads, really simple to make. I'll put a link to a video right here where you can watch how to make these types of pads, or it'll be up in this corner. This synth here is more of a tension builder. It's here to excite the breakdown, make the build up, and then drop into the track. So it's called Evolving Yodeler is the preset. And by itself, it sounds like this. The MIDI is just like this polyrhythmic with these longer notes to create a bit of movement. And then what I've done is added some distortion, some delay, and some reverb to push it further back. Some auto filter, opening it up. And then this EQ here is also an auto filter. There's an LFO on here as well, so it's actually opening and closing that auto filter a little bit to create a bit of movement. And then this here is opening as the track is building up, and it builds up into the breakdown, into the build up, drops out again at the drop, but then slowly builds back up into the track. And it's just like a huge sound. It's moving around. It's adding a ton of value to that breakdown. This one's just another layer, adding a little bit of extra twinkle to the breakdown. Something super simple, just like a little atmosphere. And then a bunch of impacts and such. So they just like these impacts here. These are actually like bass sounds, and they're just there to complement the bass even more. It's hard, a little bit hard to hear when there's so much going on. They're basically just accenting the bass layer that I have at the top here, this one here. And then just some other, effects, some risers, white noise, and stuff like that, just to increase the energy in the breakdown and build up. And then the pre-drop is really cool because it just kind of cuts all the energy and does a little drum fill before it drops back in. Nice. Up next, we have a track called Feather. The track is 122 beats per minute, and the key that I'm using is D, but it's actually the Mixolydian scale mode, which is a different version of the scale. I'll talk about that later when I get down to the melodies. So right now, don't worry about that. We'll get to it a little bit later. So I'm not going to spend too much time on the drums and the kick in this one. I want to go through the more important parts like the bass line and the synths. I'll still cover those, the drums and stuff, but I'll just be going a little bit quickly. So for the kick drum, 2 layers as usual, a top and a bottom, and then this one actually has like an accent kick. And that's just part of like the groove of the track. Onto the bass line. Let's listen to the bass line with the kick. Not sure why that effect is there, but that's okay. So this is the MIDI for the bass. So we have the first bass layer. It's the clean sub. I mean, it has some top end to it, some heat wave for some distortion. I actually have a delay on it, which is something I rarely ever do because it can make it really messy. So I have some mid-side EQ on the group itself to cut out anything that's in the stereo image below a certain point. I have some EQ cutting off the top of here with some automation, which is going to open up into the drop. So that should actually be open there. Track spacer from the kick drum. And then this Infinity Bass is a bass enhancement tool. It's one of my absolute favorite tools by Slate Digital. And it's like a bass saturator enhancer. It just really makes the bass line sound really nice and full. Let's take a listen before and after. I'm only using 20% as well. Super effective tool. I really love using that. First layer of bass, I just have this MIDI here, and it is pretty simple, but it changes from the D to the F to give it that nice uplifting feeling. And it is playing on the kick drum, so I have to make sure that I am using a track spacer or like a sidechain tool so that it's not overlapping too much when the kick is hitting. But that's just the way that the groove worked, so it's totally fine as long as I'm sidechaining properly. Then the second layer of bass, so it's simple but punchy bass preset, BSOD square, sawtooth, really low octaves, and then a sub. And then using the envelope 2 to kind of add a little bit of pluckiness to this. Even though I'm cutting off like most of the high end, it still gives it that punch to cut through the mix. The second layer is actually the same preset, but I'm opening up the cutoff a little bit more. The first layer, cutting out a lot of those lows together. They sound like this. Third layer is a little bit different of the MIDI. It's basically like a counter rhythm. So it's rhythmic and it's playing with the bass line, but kind of against it to give a little bit more complexity. Lots of low end cutout. And it's just a very simple groove, but it just adds a little bit to that bass line so that sounds more interesting. Especially because it's like on the same beat as where the clap would be. It just makes it really upbeat and fun. 2 more bass layers. Just like a nice little buzzy bass accent to keep the groove going a little bit more. And then another one here that comes in more of like a high pitch sound. So it's just a sawtooth with a bit of attack and a very fast decay. So it's just whoom. Some delay, some EQ, some reverb, simple stuff, nothing to write home about. But that all together is just giving that really interesting sounding bass line. Let's take a listen one more time with the kick. And the placement, like I said, the placement of the sounds makes it a little bit more upbeat. This one here being on the kind of like, it just kind of like makes like kind of do. I don't know how to explain that, but it just makes it a bit more interesting whimsically, and it makes it a bit more like fun. And that's the vibe I was going for with this track. There is some stuff in the bass, in the build-up. Just like a sawy, is that an adjective? So for this one, I just automated the sustain and the reverb and probably the feedback, the dry wet of the reverb and delay. And that's just to build some tension in the breakdown. So it's more of like a build-up sound. So we have the dry wet, the filters opening up. The release time is opening up. The sustain is opening up. And the dry wet of the reverb and the delay is opening up. And that makes that really nice big building sound. All right, moving on to the drums next. Like I said, not going to spend too much time on it. Let me just show you the MIDI. Pretty simple. 2 layers of hat. A punchier one and a grittier one. I try to have a punchy hat and then a body hat. One that's going to cut through the mix and one that's going to give it that nice body to layering it up with an open hat. Really nice and full sounding hi-hat. Again, more body to cut through the mix. A shaker that's quantized. So this one's very on the grid. Well, actually, it sounds a little bit swingy. Sounds quite a bit swingy. But nice and still on the grid quite a bit. Then I have the shaker loop add swing. So this is a really nice basic wave shaker loop. I'll put a link to this pack in the link in the description below. And this is just to add that nice ear candy, combining that with the quantized one. So you have one that's on the grid and one that's a little bit more off the grid. Clap and snare. Of course, 2 layers as usual. Percussion. This LFO is controlling this cutoff here. And that's just giving it that like, so here, oh my gosh, I can't talk. Hear how it goes. It's just lined up with that rate. So the rate is on half. And it just gives it that kind of more playful percussion movement. And it's really subtle, but it's going to make that more interesting to the listener. And then this free clip is another free tool. It's just cutting off the peaks. Another percussion, we have the clave. Very progressive to have a clave. Then this textural loop. So I made this the same way as I made the other textural loop that I showed you. Just a bunch of EQ, a bunch of delay, and then just panning that delay back and forth, cutting out a lot of that, adding some LFOs on the filtering, opening and closing it, and you can make these really nice textural loops. Let's listen to each individual drum with the kick drum. Oh, there's my snare build. And let's listen in the context of the track. So now I'm going to jump into the synths, and remember when I mentioned earlier that we are in the D mixolydian scale. So if I look at the MIDI for the main lead, you can see here that it's D mixolydian, which actually gives it much more of like a happy, uplifting, daytime vibe, which is perfect for the vibe that I was going for in this track. You'll notice that it sounds a little bit more happy, a little bit more like hopeful and whimsical. So I'm actually starting at the C, and then I move up to the D in a little bit of the lead here, and that gives it a bit of tension. It goes from the C to the D, which makes it feel resolved. So at first, when you're hearing the C, it's building a bit of like mystery and tension, and when it plays the D, it feels like relaxing, and it feels like complete. It's resolved. So I'll let you listen to that first, and then we'll take a look at the lead itself. Hear that when it hits the D? Right? It feels like when it hits the D note, it feels like satisfying. And that's because the root note is actually the D. So I'm playing that lower note first, then going to the D. It's just a unique, like something I wanted to try that was a bit more unique. Instead of starting on the root note, I wanted to start on something different. And I think it works really well, especially when the track builds up more and we play along with these other bass notes over here. It works really well by changing that bass note. Let's listen to the different bass notes with that lead. The bass note changes. And then it changes back. So it's changing to the D, to the F up in the bass, like I mentioned earlier, and those notes are playing very well off those different bass note changes. And that is just adding a lot of value to the melodic structure of the track. So I guess the takeaway is don't just rely on one melody or one bass line. Try to play against each other in a way that is synergistic and can elevate either the lead or the bass line, but you can actually elevate both by playing them together in a way that you might not think would work right away. It's kind of arbitrary and maybe it's not making total sense, but I hope you know what I mean. Let's take a look at the lead itself. It is a quad saw and some white noise, or like the white noise wavetable, and it's just a really nice plucky, pushing up some of that high end here. And then I automate the sustain as well in certain areas of the track. So if I go here, it's just to build a little bit of tension in the buildup. So by opening up that sustain, it just holds that note longer and builds up that tension. And then I have the filter opening up. So the filter opens and closes throughout the whole track. This is really important. If we look and pay attention to what's happening, it opens as the notes are playing. So it starts quieter. Bum, 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 bum. And that adds a ton of value because it makes it just really interesting to listen to over and over again. Oh, and by the way, I forgot to mention, this track I actually wrote in one of my masterclasses. So the second masterclass I ever did. So if you want to watch how I made this entire track from start to finish in about 9 hours, click the link in the description below or up in this card right here to get access to that masterclass. And I'll also put a link to the other masterclasses that you can sign up for in the description below. I calm it back down in the breakdown, so it's a little bit less tense. I increase the delay feedback and dry wet, so it's more of like atmospheric, and then build that back up in the drop. Oh yeah, one more thing I forgot to mention is that it actually builds up in pitch in the drop as well, in the breakdown as well. So as the track is playing, I'm playing through different notes. Just going up further and further on the scale. Increasing that dry wet of the delay and the feedback to make it even more atmospheric and more interesting. And that scale, that Mixolydian mode, makes it feel very whimsical, hopeful, bright, happy. And then here, building that delay builds so much tension. CO2 cans. That'd be cool if I had CO2 canisters in my studio. Okay, so moving on to the next sounds, we have another main lead here. This one is like a reverberated version of this, so I just bounced it down and I filtered out a lot of the frequencies, just to give it a bit of low power to that. And then it's just there to bulk up the lead sound, some reverb atmospheres to kind of add a bit of ear candy. So for this sound, it's just a basic pluck on the filter 1 and then the LFO. So the LFO is moving just back and forth really fast. If I hold it, it gives it like that distortion sound. It gives it a nice gritty distortion, which I love. I love how it does that. It's really cool. So that's what I'm doing on the LFO on the cutoff. So it gets that nice, on the pulse width, sorry. So it gets that kind of grittiness. You can also do it on the cutoff. And then the sound is just being pushed up on the bright part of the track. It is quite bright, so I am using a multi-band dynamics, but I am actually pulling up with some upwards compression, which I'm not going to get into, and then some echo, reverb, another multi-band to kind of grab the top bits, especially when it builds up here, it gets really loud. Decapitator for some distortion. I love decapitator. Delay and reverb, of course. All right, let's go back down. We'll have another sound here. This is what I just called ARP, even though it's not an ARP. It's just like a... So I'm using a wavetable and I'm opening up the frequency here with a ton of reverb and delay. And I'm using Unison Sound Doctor, which is a chef's kiss. I love this plugin. I'll put a link to that as well in the description. And this is using this dreamy preset. So without it, just opening that sound right at the end there. And then with the Sound Doctor, really, really nice stuff. Some atmospheres. Using Valhalla Supermassive, of course, to give that really nice big atmospheric sound. And this is another Boards of Zelina. So I'm using the same preset as I did in the other track, and then just adding a ton of reverb on it with the Supermassive. Free plugin, some effects here. I got this, I don't even remember exactly how. Oh, it looks like it's a vocal. So I took a vocal, and I believe I reversed it, and I just chopped it up. Or here's the full vocal. Yep, doesn't sound anything like what you might want to use. And I just grabbed just a piece of that and repeated it over and over like a polyrhythm. With some delay. Some atmosphere. A lower atmosphere. A higher atmosphere. Some more atmosphere. A lot of atmosphere as usual. It's progressive house, baby. Deep prog. Another atmosphere. And another vocal ambience down here. All these different atmospheres and ambiences and stuff can really help elevate the track. I like to grab a few and then just record some really big reverbs on them and create different variations of them, and then pitch them up, pitch them down, and then you have a lot of different versions of the same thing. Right, and that way you have all these atmospheres playing in the background, and they're not just the same ones you're using over and over. They can add a little bit of variation. Let's listen one more time to all the leads here and in the build-up, and then we'll move on to the next track, which is the the belter. So let me go through each individual channel and turn them on so we can listen. So we're going to move into the final track, which is the melter. But I just want to remind you that I do offer music production coaching as well as music production courses. Links to those are in the description below. And a great way to support me, support the channel, is either by signing up for my Patreon or just by purchasing these tracks. I'll put links to all that in the links in the description below. All right, so now we're ready for the melter. This is actually a collaboration I did with another artist named Mazer, and I have to ask his permission if I can say this or not, so I'll let you know. Who was actually one of my coaching students. He came to me for some track feedback advice. We started writing this track together from one of our coaching sessions. Like I just mentioned, if you are interested in upping your production game, then check out the links in the description below. Now for the melter, just to remind you what we're working with. All right, let's jump in. Kick drum, as usual, 2 layers. Some EQ, some overdrive. Adding a ton of that color onto that, and then some compression, pushing up some punchiness, the usual bidness. Next, we have the bass. Let's listen with the kick. Oh yeah, and the track's 121 beats per minute, and it's in G sharp minor. So the first layer of bass is the sub. It is a CRM preset. There's some sidechain from the kick using a saw, square wave rather, and a saw rounded. This one's just to add a little bit of that higher octave of bass. Really nice full sounding sub. On the bass group itself, we have decapitator for some saturation, glue compression, EQ8 for some automation, and then some sidechain compression from the kick. And then on the bass layer itself, some more sidechain compression because it is hitting at the same time as the kick. So I really want to duck that out of the way and just have it kind of glued to the kick. And the CRM patch itself is just a little bit of like a pluck. Even though it's subtle, it's just adding a little bit of power to that. And then the velocity is also adding a bit more. So the velocity inside of the MIDI will change to make the bass a little bit pluckier. And then the quieter sound here, just to add that kind of little bit of extra dynamics to the bass. So it's just a little bit quieter on this one compared to this one. So it's more like mid-top. Following the same bass pattern. A little bit less though. This preset is, it has like a bit of a tack on it. So it's using this LFO on the cutoff. It's using it like an envelope, not an LFO, but it is restarting every time. So it's just opening, and then the longer notes go up and then go down. So it's wump, wump, wow. And that just gives it that little bit of character and gives it like a bit of a unique flavor. Cutting out a lot of that low end because we don't need it. Again, you'll get these presets in the pack that I make available in the link in the description for free. Mid-top here, there's another bass sound. This is called Plucked Calypso. And that's from a bass pack from Basic Waves. Link in the description. And then another mid-top. I like adding in multiple layers like this because they just Well, that's a nice one too. Probably another bound to basic waves preset. Yep, another basic waves preset. So these are really good for adding those bass accents. And then I've actually resampled some and then placed them here. So there is, this one's turned off, but this one here. Lots of EQ here. So I'll record these using different presets and different like tools like Shaper Box or Sound Doctor, and I'll record them and then resample them by cutting them up and placing them within the track. And then it just adds that extra layers to the bass line. This bass stab is not on, but let's see what it sounds like. Yeah, same thing. I probably recorded that with like Tantra or Sound Doctor or something. So let's listen to the bass notes all together and then one by one. So I'll do with the kick. And in the track. Drum, same deal. I'm not going to go too far into it, but let's just go quickly through. This is what they sound like all together. The ride. So very full. With these types of songs, you want the higher energy. You want your drums to sound a little bit more full, a little bit more exciting, a little bit brighter and full and like distorted. Not like overly distorted, but that crunch and that grit will make them feel a bit more higher energy. So the first hi-hat, really sharp, punchy hi-hat. Second layer, nice shaker loop by the Deluxe drum pack by Basic Waves. Another shaker. This one has like a bit of character on it. It's a bit unique. I usually don't do these. Maybe this was probably Mazer. The ride is there to add some power. Using that only in the second part of the drop here to make it a little bit more exciting. Percussion. Same thing, a lot of percussion loops. Little altar boy is here to change the pitch. Gives it a lot more color, a lot more character. Another percussion loop with the altar boy again. So bringing those by an octave down using the altar boy gives it so much color and character, and then they just sound really cool together. The drums without that percussion is much different. Rim, 2 layers, just hitting instead of a clap, and then we have a shakers and clap here. Another top loop here. Same thing, cutting out a lot of that high end and then using a vocoder. Right, cutting out a lot of those lows and highs, and the vocoder to kind of add a little bit of color. Then all together one more time in the whole track. I'll keep the rides off. And on the full track. If you've made it this far, make sure to smash the like button. If you're enjoying this longer form content, I need to know if you want longer videos like this where I go more in depth or shorter videos, or feel free to leave a comment as well, letting me know if you prefer longer or shorter videos, and then that will help me curate videos for the future. For the synths, this is what we have. Lots to cover, so let's just jump in. First, I have this like synth hit, nothing special. It's just like a little atmosphere. This layer here, this is used to get a little bit more power and excitement out of the track in the drop. So this actually encourages that tempo a lot. Listen to the drop without this. And then with it, it's just like that nice fast rhythm is just making that drop feel even more exciting. And that was a good way to make the final drop have like something extra. I mean, it already has a lot of synths going on and it's very big, but we wanted this drop to just really hit hard. And that is a layer that does that. And it's very simple to do something like this. Just add a rhythmic, fast moving sound, usually 16th notes, and that can exemplify the power or the perceived tempo of it. So I'm going to focus quite a bit on the lead here because it is the bread and butter of this track. So the lead itself is a Pigments preset that we mess around with. So let me open up Pigments. It's called, did I name it Fat Dirty Lead? Maybe. So this is how it sounds on its own. What we did is, besides change around some of the settings, we automated a lot. So we automated the pitch bend. Let me just open up all the automations here. There's the pitch bend itself. This is the main thing that you're hearing a lot of the time. So the notes that are playing just look like this. So they're just very simple. Bum, 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 bum. Very simple. But then you have these pitch bends. And then these big ones. So that is creating a huge shift in the way that sounds, but also we have a second pitch shifting amount, which goes over in the build-up. So this is pitch drift, which is a free tool, and it basically is just shifting that pitch up and down even more, and we're doing that only in the build-up to give it even more of that pitch shifting. And then we have the speed as well from there, so it's increasing in speed, which gives it that really big, like one of the really big reasons why it changes so much. The macro 3 also builds up in here, and that is shifting the weirdness. So making it even more detuned and weird. The cutoff is also opening and closing periodically through the track to always be changing it, always be making it unique and different. And then I have the delay times on the 16th. This is adding even more pitch craziness. So when these change really quickly, this is one of my signature things that I do. When you change the delay very quickly, it repitches it and makes this really cool sound. If I go with the delay and turn this 100% dry wet, so combining all of these different pitch parameters, we're creating this really, really dynamic lead sound that just has so much movement, and it just creates a crazy sound. So you hear that? That's the delay only. That like weird type sound. So all of this was used to make the lead sound very unique, very like exaggerated and interesting without making it too hard to listen to and just too crazy. So it has a lot of craziness to it, but it still retains the original strong foundation of that sound. And it was really important to us while making this. So you can still groove along to it. You still feel like you hear that lead, but it just sounds really chaotic at the same time. And it's literally just the same melody the whole time with all these different pitch changes. And it just really, really, I love this lead very, very much. And it just absolutely smashes on the drop. I think a big part of why it smashes so much on the drop is because we're building it up a lot here and we're kind of washing it out here as well. So the dry wet goes up and it kind of pushes the sound back. And then when it finally comes in on the drop, it hits really strong again. So you're building up all this like airiness and then you pull it all back and smash it back down with the strong dry lead. And then that's a really good tip to try and make your leads hit a little bit harder. So the second lead layer, just something to add a little bit to low end. And barely even noticeable. Another wonky sound here to add even more craziness. It's the same preset. Just playing very randomly. Some pitch bending going on. Just to add even more to build up that tension. I love doing stuff like this in build-ups. Vocals here are really nice because they add like some atmosphere. Lots of delay on there. There is an alter boy and a micro shift, just creating really weird pitches. Again, the alter boy dropping the pitches and shifting those tunes to make it really weird sounding. And then we have like this repeating. Same with the vocal from the last track, just a repeating vocal here. So this vocal playing over and over again, just again adds like pressure to the drop. It adds momentum to the drop. And it's just like a nice way of adding those little details that you don't really even notice are there, but without them, you notice that they're not there. Very subtle but professional sounding detail. These little details can go a long way when you're trying to write really high quality tracks like this, if I do say so myself. A nice atmospheric texture, just to kind of add a little bit of pattiness to this. Another one. These are just like different from different sample packs, and then some effects down here, of course, just like impacts and big white noises and stuff. So I know this was a long video, but please let me know in the comment section if you prefer these longer videos or shorter ones, and I will make them more appropriate for you. And final reminder to grab the free download of some presets, samples used in these tracks, as well as a free kick sample pack. Link for that is in the description below. If you enjoyed this video, want to see another one similar to it, then click this playlist right here where I cover a bunch of other tracks. And if you want to watch something based on what YouTube thinks you'll like, then click this video right here.